Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
Today I'd like to discuss noise-related hearing loss. It's a very common occurrence. I mean, anybody who's walking around with headphones on and they're blasting music, it's going to blow out their eardrums. And the name of this episode is NAC for noise-related hearing loss. NAC is a very well-researched supplement. It's an abbreviation for N-acetylcysteine. We'll go into that in a couple of minutes. But first, let's discuss hearing in general. What's going on? How do we hear? Hearing depends on the presence of sound waves. Now, sound waves are changes in pressure. This is caused by vibrating molecules. So to give you an example, if you slam your door, it vibrates molecules, which changes air pressure. That hits your eardrum. That's the sound you're hearing. That's the sound wave. So sound waves influence sound, the loudness of the sound, the pitch of the sound, the timbre of the sound. Now, when we discuss loudness, it depends on amplitude, or how high a sound, how strong a sound, how loud a sound is it. The greater the amplitude, the louder the sound. So amplitude is measured in decibels. We'll go into that later. I'll give you an example of decibels related to common sounds like a lawnmower or snoring, etc. Now, the visible part of your ear, the outside of your ear, collects sound waves and passes them along a canal to your eardrum. It's a membrane. And when your sound waves hit the eardrum, it vibrates. Now, your eardrum transmits the vibration to three little bones. They're called ossicles. They're the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. They're in the middle of your ear. And they look like that. They look like a hammer, an anvil, and a stirrup. Their function is to make the sound louder. They amplify the vibrations. The vibrations then move to the cochlea of your inner ear. Now, the cochlea is a tube. It's filled with fluid. It's coiled. Inside the cochlea, there are these little hairs that are called cilia. And they're different thicknesses and lengths, so they separate the vibrations. The vibrations that reach the inner ear cause the fluid in the cochlea to move in waves. These waves, in turn, make the hair cells move, picking up the vibrations and differentiating them. Now, this triggers impulses to neurons that connect with the hair cells. The neurons are nerve cells. These are your hearing nerve cells. And then they bundle together to form your auditory nerve, which connects with your brain. And the brain is where you finally hear the sound. So hearing takes place in the brain. So hearing is a vibration. It's converted into an electrical current that is transformed into sound. So hearing is a sound wave, a bundle of vibrations that hit your ear, and the vibrations are transformed into an electrical current, which then goes to the auditory processing part of the brain and is changed into the sound you're hearing, whatever sound it is, whether it's a baby crying or a bird singing, whatever it might be. Now, the hair cells in the inner ear are different lengths, and they're different thicknesses, and there's a limited number of them. So if they're damaged, they don't grow back. And because they're involved with differentiating sounds and vibrations, losing certain hairs leads to losing certain levels of hearing. So typically this is what happens with noise-related hearing loss. So let's give you a couple of examples of amplitude, loudness of sound. Breathing would be 10 decibels. A whisper or rustling leaves would be 20. If you're sitting in a library, don't speak over 30 decibels, just a little above a whisper. Now, you're having a conversation on the couch with somebody, that's usually about 50, 60, 70 decibels. A noisy restaurant, city traffic, that's 70 decibels. Your alarm clock's going towards 80. The subway is 90. Your motorcycle, when you're revving up your Harley Davidson, that's about 105 decibels. Now it's starting to get serious. Because once you get to 120 decibels, it could damage your hearing. So your power lawnmower is about 110 decibels. if you're in a noisy discotheque or a loud bar, or you shoot off a shotgun, that's 120 decibels. That's why when you go to trap shooting, you have to wear there's earmuffs, those noise-protecting earmuffs. Otherwise, you lose your hearing. An air raid siren has to be loud. That's 130. Front row seat in a rock concert, 140. That's also a jet engine when it's really churning up. When you hit 150 decibels, your chest begins to vibrate, and if you hit 160 decibels, your eardrums will burst. So there you go. So let's talk about NAC. There's literally thousands and thousands of studies on NAC. It's used as an antidote in poison treatment centers. So it's used for poison antidotes, especially for Tylenol. Tylenol could be toxic to your liver, especially if you mix it with alcohol. So NAC is the antidote to Tylenol toxicity, acetaminophen toxicity. NAC is also used to break up phlegm in the hospital. It's an inhaler that breaks up phlegm. They also give people NAC before you go for a diagnostic test. When you go for a diagnostic test, you frequently have to swallow or get injected with a radioactive isotope, a dye that shows up the organ they're looking at. So it's a contrast medium. And the contrast mediums are radioactive, and they're passed out through your kidneys over a 6 or 7 day period. So you want to protect your kidneys from the radioactivity. That's the place that's getting hit the most frequently with them. NAC helps protect the kidneys. That's what the research shows if you take enough of it for a long enough time. So it protects the liver from toxins. It protects the kidneys from radiation. It breaks up phlegm. For instance, people with cystic fibrosis, they inherit genes from their parents that thickens their mucus, which can literally suffocate them. They use NAC as an inhaler to break up the bonds in the mucus. They can clear out the mucus. NAC is unbelievable for allergies. NAC is great for the brain. In fact, it helps with a number of compulsive behaviors and addictive behaviors. NAC is converted into something called glutathione. We'll talk about that in a second. That helps the body get rid of toxins. It helps shut down and remove toxins through the kidneys and the liver. But today we're talking about NAC as a precursor to glutathione. Young people have this very powerful available pool of antioxidants. They kind of dwindle with age, but they also vary from person to person. And at the core of their antioxidant protection is this master antioxidant enzyme that lasts for several days, by the way, called glutathione. Glutathione is a master antioxidant for protecting your brain from free radicals, for protecting your eyes from sunlight and free radicals, for protecting your lungs from cigarette smoke and inhaling pollution. It just works throughout the body. It's an amazing antioxidant, glutathione. The level of glutathione varies from person to person. That's a genetic thing. The amount you make depends on your genes, and it could vary wildly from person to person. Plus, it tends to decline with age and during disease states such as lung diseases and chronic progressive neuromuscular diseases and brain diseases and heart disease and diabetes. So a whole bunch of diseases inappropriately use up all your glutathione. You don't have enough left to protect you. What would it normally protect you from? Well, when you use oxygen and sugar for energy, there's always a byproduct called hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is explosively toxic. It could kill your cells. And glutathione is one of the antioxidants that helps break down peroxides. Otherwise, the peroxides can damage the fats in your body. You develop lipid peroxides. It's very unhealthy for the brain and the eyes and the heart and many other organs and systems. So NAC is the rate-limiting factor for creating glutathione. NAC stands for N-acetylcysteine. And there's many studies for N-acetylcysteine in brain health, in heart health, in liver health, in many different conditions, even polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis. It's just so many different uses for NAC. But today we're talking about helping to shield your hearing from noise-related hearing damage, hearing loss. So let's go to the studies. This is the journal Aging. It's the Center for Hearing and Deafness, University of Buffalo, and the Jackson Laboratory, Bar Harbor in Maine. And they're looking at NAC, but this is in laboratory animals. And believe me, I'm not happy about testing animals in a lab. Believe me. I don't even know if it's needed. But these are just mice that are prone to hearing loss. and they're just exposing them to some noise, nothing terrible. And they found that if they gave them NAC, it was converted into glutathione, and it was protecting the hairs in their inner ear. If you could protect those hairs, and don't forget, if they get damaged, you can't replace them. If you could protect those hairs, you help prevent hearing loss. So in that case, it was working. Now, the number one injury in the military is damage to your hearing, like ringing in the ears or a reduction in your ability to hear. So this is the journal Hearing Research. It's the Department of Otolaryngology, Naval Medical Center in San Diego, their Department of Defense Spatial Orientation Center, which sounds very impressive to me. Sounds like the kind of place where they spin astronauts around before they go into space. And they said despite the use of hearing protection devices, noise-induced hearing loss is the number one injury to military personnel. So in this case, they're mixing two supplements. They're mixing NAC, which stands for N-acetylcysteine, and Alcar, which is the abbreviation for acetyl L-carnitine. NAC is a super powerful antioxidant that reduces inflammation, and it does get into the brain, and it does get into your hearing apparatus. And Alcar helps prevent damage to your energy-producing part of your cell, your mitochondria. So it helps mitochondrial function and integrity. So these are lab animals exposed to noise, and if they gave them NAC with Alcar, it strongly reduced hearing damage significantly, and it helped prevent the loss of your hearing cells. They said both supplements help, but if you use them together, it's especially helpful in preventing damage to the little hairs in the cochlea that pick up and differentiate the vibration, so it really helps protect your hearing. They also said, this is very interesting, that came out of their research, that the hearing damage comes in two waves. There's the initial damage from the loud noise, so anything over 120 decibels, like an airplane engine or a loud rock concert or one of those monster truck rallies, that can cause permanent damage to your hearing because it over vibrates those little hearing cells and it kills them in the cochlea. So they found that not only is the initial damage occurring from hearing the very loud sound, like an explosion or a jet engine, but there's a second wave of damage that occurs 7 to 10 days after exposure. So you really need to take the NAC and the Alcar for over 10 days after you're exposed to loud noise if you want to help protect your hearing, according to their data. There's the first wave that's from the rock concert, and then 7 to 10 days later, there's a second wave of free radical damage. That's the thing that the antioxidants snuff out. That's why the NAC is so important. So here's the journal Acta Otolaryngologia. It's a European journal. It's a very good journal. It's the Department of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery, the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. And they're looking at people with sudden idiopathic sensorineural hearing loss. So let me explain what that is, because that's like speaking Dutch, and I don't speak Dutch. Idiopathic, they don't know what's causing it. Sensorineural hearing loss means it's damage to the hair cells, usually from a loud noise. So it's noise-related hearing loss. It's sudden hearing loss. And it's a case-controlled study of these people with damage to their hearing that's typically caused by loud noises. And they were treated with a very powerful anti-inflammatory drug, prednisone, plus intratympanic dexamethasone. Now, that means that they were putting dexamethasone into the ear as eardrops. Now, one group got the prednisone oral, they swallowed a tablet, and they got the dexamethasone in their ear. The other group got the same thing, but they were given NAC supplements, NAC capsules. And they found that at 6 months, there was a big level of protection from having given the NAC. They usually give NAC 600 milligrams 3 to 4 times a day with food. Always take NAC with food. But normally in these studies, they give NAC 600 milligrams 3 to 4 times a day with food. So this is 6 months after they were exposed to the noise, and now they're checking regular hearing frequencies like conversational hearing, etc. And they found that they went by who recovered at least 50% of their hearing. So they had real hearing damage. Who recovered at least 50% of their hearing? 63% of the patients with NAC added to the drugs recovered at least half of their hearing, and only 35% where they had the drugs only without the NAC. This is very powerful evidence that NAC is very important for protecting your hearing. So here's another study in people. It's in the journal Hearing Research. It's the Ear Institute and University of Oklahoma, and Yale University School of Medicine in New Haven, and the Department of Otolaryngology, University of Colorado Health Science Center, and a couple of other academic research centers. And the patients came from the VA Medical Center in Portland, Oregon. And they go on to say, listen, despite a very robust program to help protect the hearing of our military personnel, it's just not working. They're still at very high risk of hearing loss, of noise-induced hearing loss. From rifles, the report of a rifle shot, or jet engines. I mean, there's so many noisy things that they're exposed to in the military. And they said that for over a decade, they've been looking into antioxidants to help protect the hearing of members of the military. And they said in these studies, one antioxidant stands out among all the rest. It's N-acetylcysteine. It's consistently reduced permanent noise-induced hearing loss in laboratory studies and in members of the military. So they did a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled human clinical trial looking at how safe was NAC, and did it actually help prevent hearing loss in people in the military after weapons training. So it was almost 600 people in the military. About 300 were on placebo and 300 were on NAC. And they found that the study didn't go on long enough, to be honest with you. But they found that the NAC given as a supplement was preventing hearing damage in the ear that was exposed to the rifle, the ear that was right next to the rifle. So if you're right-handed, it's going to be up on your right shoulder, right? So here's another study. This is in the journal Noise Health. It's the Department of Clinical Science Karolinska Institute. That's in Stockholm, Sweden. The Karolinska Institute is a major research hub. They're so well thought of that they hand out the Nobel Prizes for medicine or the Nobel Prize for physiology. I mean, it's kind of like Oxford University. It's kind of like Harvard or Yale. I mean, it's a really top-notch academic research institution. So this was a very strange study because you're asking for it if you join this study. They said that when you're outdoors shooting a gun and you're wearing earmuffs or some kind of noise protection, there's some risk of hearing loss, but not terrible. But what if you're in an enclosed place where the noise is magnified because it's bouncing off the walls, like an echo? That's when you can experience true hearing loss. So they put these officers, 23 military officers, in a bunker, and they shot rifles. Now that's a little crazy. I hope they were wearing their earmuffs. They forgot to mention that, but I'm sure they were. And then they did a second group of military officers, except this time they gave them NAC, and they went into the bunker and they shot their rifles. And they found that NAC was preventing problems with the linearity of hearing. When you hear at 110 decibels, 1,000 decibels, 2,000 decibels, it's very linear. It's very even. But when your hearing gets messed up, it's not so linear anymore. They found that when they gave them the NAC and they shot off the rifles inside the bunker, it was preventing damage to the linearity of the hearing in their cochlea. So that's actually a pretty cool thing. NAC was protecting your hearing after shooting a rifle. I mean, come on. So here's several studies of people working in noisy hospitals. But first, this one, Acta Otolaryngologica. That's researchers from Taiwan, China. I don't know how you're supposed to say China when you say Taiwan. Formosa, Taiwan. And they're talking about NAC helps prevent hearing damage from noise. That's what they're saying. I'm translating because they're talking very technically. And it helps prevent sudden deafness caused by damage to the hairs in the inner ear caused by loud noise. So these are 35 people with sudden deafness. They gave them NAC alone, or they gave them corticosteroids. 35 of them got NAC, and 35 were given corticosteroids, like prednisone. And here's what they found. Before they came to the hospital with the sudden deafness, the level of sudden deafness, the severity of the sudden deafness was very similar. It was very equal. But what they found was if they gave them NAC, they regained a lot more hearing than if they gave them steroids. 91% of the patients on the NAC recovered a great deal of their hearing versus 57% of the patients on the drugs. So almost twice as many people on the NAC recovered a great deal of hearing compared to the drugs. That's why I said you really need to use both. At the University of Miami, they used both the dexamethasone eardrops, prednisone tablets that you swallow, and NAC supplements, and that was a real winner. So here's 48 men. Well, actually, it doesn't say that. It says 48 workers. 48 workers. So, pardon me. So here's a study of 48 workers who work in a very loud textile factory. They're making the material for clothing. And they split them into 3 groups. One group received nothing, one group received NAC, and one group received ginseng. This is to protect your hearing. And they followed them for a number of weeks. And they found that both NAC and ginseng help prevent damage to their hearing. However, NAC was far superior to ginseng. There's a couple of studies that Panax ginseng, we're talking about Panax ginseng, which is the Asian ginseng, helps protect hearing when you're exposed to loud noise. But apparently, because it does have a lot of antioxidants, but apparently NAC is more effective. So here's the last one I'm going to go through. Because this is protecting hearing from a toxin. In this case, it's an antibiotic. Several powerful antibiotics that are used for very extreme infections, very dangerous infections, can damage your hearing and your kidneys. In this case, they're giving them amikacin. Amikacin is used, this is for patients with peritonitis. Peritonitis, that's the lining of the inside of your abdomen, and it gets inflamed and infected. So they're giving them amikacin, the antibiotic, to cure it, because amikacin gets in there and it kills everything. But the problem is amikacin damages your hearing. It causes what we call ototoxicity. Now, believe it or not, there's a lot of drugs that are ototoxic, but the level of ototoxicity varies. So let me just mention that before we go on with this episode, because I didn't plan on saying this. For instance, statin drugs like atorvastatin and simvastatin have a very, very, very low level of ototoxicity. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just a little minor. Now, aspirin, Advil, Aleve, celecoxib, that's worse. They can actually cause a little damage. They cause ringing in the ears, what's called tinnitus, and millions of Americans suffer with tinnitus. We actually have a different episode where we talk about tinnitus and nutrients that help with tinnitus, nutrients like melatonin and alcohol with ALA. So in this case, they're using a dangerous antibiotic, but it's all that's probably going to work in 46 patients with peritonitis. And they split them into 2 groups. They gave them NAC or placebo. And they measured hearing a week after the amikacin and 4 weeks after, a week after stopping the amikacin and 4 weeks after stopping the amikacin. And they found that NAC really helped protect the hearing from the drugs. Now, I doubt if your entire life, if you even know anybody who'll be on amikacin, but there's more commonly used antibiotics in the United States, like gentamicin. Gentamicin is a drug used for very serious, very dangerous bacterial infections. For instance, infections you pick up in a hospital. It's used in infections where other antibiotics no longer work. It's toxic to your brain, we call that neurotoxic. It's toxic to your kidneys, we call that nephrotoxic. But it's also toxic to your hearing, We call that ototoxic. And if they give you gentamicin, chances are 10 years later you're going to lose a lot of your hearing, if not all of your hearing. Another drug more commonly used is called vancomycin. It's a very powerful drug. It gets into all different tissues. They use it for serious infections. Like there's a bacterium that you can pick up if you use certain types of antibiotics related to ciprofloxacin, Cipro. They can kill off all your good bacteria, and there's one bacteria left standing called Clostridium difficile. And if it's certain strains of Clostridium difficile, it can literally tear holes in your colon, in your large intestine, and you have to have surgery to remove the damaged colon. It causes a type of collagenous colitis that's very, very dangerous and even deadly. It's killed a lot of people. So vancomycin is used for killing C. difficile because the antibiotic is safer than the infection. However, vancomycin can commonly cause hearing problems. So it just goes to show you there's a lot of drugs that affect your hearing. If I was on one of these drugs, I would take a capsule of NAC every day just to protect my hearing. In general, I take NAC. I take one a day with my lunch. You always take NAC with food. In general, I take a 600 milligram capsule of NAC every day with my lunch to restore my glutathione levels because I'm an older guy. So I want my glutathione to protect my eyes, my lungs, my heart, my liver, my kidneys, my brain. It's just a very important antioxidant. Now, in future episodes, I'm going to talk about age-related hearing loss because the supplement study for that are a little bit different. Now, other supplements for hearing, melatonin for tinnitus, ringing in the ears, Alcar with ALA for nerve health in general, so anything wrong with hearing, and ubiquinol, that's the active form of coenzyme Q10 for presbycusis, which is age-related hearing loss. So thank you for tuning into the Invite Health podcast. You could find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to your podcasts, or you just go to invitehealth.com/podcast. Please subscribe. Please leave us a review. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And I hope to see you another time on another episode of the Invite Health podcast. Thank you so much for listening.